welcome here Dean Davison. He is from Davison Law Group. And we're really excited to have you here to ask some of the questions of what's coming up.
Explain some of the legal limbo we're living in. Now, you represent some dispensary owners. Yes, how difficult of a time is it right now? How gray of an area is it right now? Because while it's still illegal, anyone who's driven around the Lower Mainland or Ontario, anywhere in the country, sees dispensaries everywhere.
It's a very interesting time. The federal government's given kind of an overview of what they see and how they see it going, and the provincial governments will implement that as time goes on. But in the interim, some municipal governments, Vancouver's a good example, have decided to kind of allow dispensaries under a regime. And they've kind of done that on their own accord, because it's still legally illegal. So right. It's a very interesting, exciting time in law. Very interesting time.
So we hear stories about dispensaries being raided. When your client, if a client of yours calls you and goes, hey, my dispensary was just raided, what happens? What is that situation like?
Well, I deal a lot with municipal government, and I deal a lot with the civil side. I don't do too much with the criminal side exactly, but that does happen, and I'm the first one usually gets a call. We try and treat it as if it was any type of situation dealing with the police or criminal. The truth of the matter is it really isn't. Effectively, when they go through the process, it seems that most of them either getting the charges dropped or it's being stayed and on hold. It seems what is happening is municipalities are using police, I would suggest, to maybe intimidate dispensaries to go away.
So, and that's interesting because
right?
As we just heard from our guest, Brian O'Day was mad because he's got, former, law and order people who work for the government are now like CEOs and working for, growers and different organizations and using the police almost to get rid of the competition.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre time we're living in right now.
It is. Toronto was very aggressive with that, and something was even more unique is they did some raids there, but then they actually asked the Vancouver police to do some equivalent raids, which trafficking is kind of trafficking, so it's not hidden that the dispensaries are selling medical marijuana or marijuana, which would be, under the laws, trafficking. So it was funny that the one province / city that was very, very aggressive is the same one that seems to be now saying we're going to do it ourselves. It just seems like they were using the police for maybe intimidation or bullying, as you said, to kind of move the competition on, which is unusual.
Yeah, no, to say the least.
It's going to be an interesting time to see.
Now, you mentioned that, this wasn't your specialty until not too long ago. When that first client approached you about getting involved in this fight, were you apprehensive? Did you think, I don't need to be involved in this? Or did you look at it going, this is, forget the issue, it's from the legal standpoint, it's fascinating.
Right. I was a little apprehensive. I recently had done the hookah in the city of Vancouver fight, which is along the same terms in some ways. Just the cities or the government was being too aggressive, wasn't necessarily interpret the law the way that my client or I thought was fair. And I saw that there was, they needed some assistance, I think, the dispensaries. But from back then to now, what I've learned about the area, what I've learned about the people that use dispensaries, and what I've learned about that it's, if you think of it as a medicine, and you think about it as something that's, if governments are here for decreasing harm reduction or decreasing harm for their constituents, there's not a lot of evidence that people using dispensaries are getting into any type of trouble, there's any crime related to it. There's very little actual evidence that dispensaries and people using marijuana are something that needs to be corrected, as opposed to maybe drinking and driving or that other things, or the people that maybe the criminal element that might be involved with selling marijuana not in dispensaries. That seems to be a real thing.
Now, do you think the dispensaries are going to be shut down in Vancouver and we're going to have different stores opening up?
It's a very weird time because the federal government has said this is the regime top level. Provinces, you can do what you want. And then provinces haven't really stepped in. We've heard a bit from our premier, but he hasn't really committed to it. But the city of Vancouver committed last year to already saying we're going to let these dispensaries stay open. So to Vancouver's credit, I think they're being proactive. In theory, the province could say tomorrow you're not doing that, but my sense is they will be allowed to stay open.
Vancouver's been fairly lenient as well compared to some of the other provinces across Canada.
Right. They're really working with the dispensary system. I think they're really trying to make that work. They recognize the expertise. They recognize that people maybe want to go in and be able to talk to somebody. So to their credit, and I've had my battles with the City of Vancouver, to their credit, I think they're taking the right approach. It just has to be fine-tuned maybe a little bit.
Now, as you've kind of alluded to, you've educated yourself just by going through the process
Right,
of
right.
what it's like. When you're discussing the situation with folks on the other side, whether it be city officials, whether it be law enforcement, and again, you deal more with civil issues.
Right.
But are you still going up against, as you're talking to people, and I don't mean using the word ignorance in a derogatory sense, but in the true sense that the people that are making decisions don't know enough about what's going on?
Yes, and in fact, I've been in front of many city councils, and I say to them, look, look for evidence that this should be shut down. Give a reason, something. And a lot of times the response is, look, it's illegal, we don't care, we're just going to shut it down. And that can be very frustrating, I think, but that's usually what happens. And I try to explain to them and show them some evidence that, it is a medicine, and there's people 50, 60 years old that have never done marijuana, medical marijuana or any marijuana, and they find there's real value, harm reduction value. There's some symptoms that go away. And these people, I think it'll be much more difficult for them. In fact, they've sworn in testimony that it'll be difficult for them to get this if the dispensaries are closed in their neighborhood.
Right.
Where would you go, right? It's
Yes.
kind of that question. And
Well, you're denying people, when it gets to that point,
Right.
again, it's pain and suffering, it almost becomes
Right,
to that
right.
point.
yeah.
Tell the folks how they can ask Dean a question.
Well, we can go online right now. Below, there's a comment bar, and you can go down there and you can type in your questions. We're going to open it up to them in a few minutes here. So yeah, get some questions down there for them.
If you're looking into a crystal ball, I know they're saying July 2018 now is the date, and we keep hearing how that's the date, but really that's not even written in stone. It'll evolve, things will change.
Yes.
If you could look into a crystal ball, if we're sitting down next year at this time and we're doing episode 48 of THC Live, what are you going to tell us? What do you think? Where do you think we're going to be?
Well, I think that these types of shows and reaching out to people and encouraging them to get involved is very key. So we're kind of in this weird, potentially pre-prohibition or end of prohibition period where the people, I think, especially the community in the marijuana community, are very active, and they should continue to do that. That, I think, can change things because politicians ultimately want to get elected. And if they hear things from people, that can change things. Now, that being said, I think that there's going to be some cases that are going to have to go through the courts. The judge is going to have to look at it with some evidence in front of them and say, this is what I think that means. This is what is right. Because we still have a charter and a constitution, and governments can pass laws that don't pass muster in the end.
No, and sometimes when the law's passed, they intentionally leave a lot of gray area, because then they do leave it up for interpretation,
Yes.
and then that does open up another kind of can of worms.
Right. And the Cannabis Act has some areas that are very wide open. It has some very specific. It seems like on the enforcement side, it's very specific, very aggressive, I would suggest. But on the interpretation, it does seem like they're leaving it up to the provinces a bit more. But I think that it's going to be an interesting time because I think judges are going to get a bit more educated and just see more people and realize that it's not necessarily a fun type of culture. It's actually, again, I'll say it again, it's more of a medicine type based. At least that's my experience.
Do you think that because we're making cannabis legal in Canada, do you think it's going to open the door for other drugs to become legal?
I think it's certainly possible because I think that there's this attitude that because marijuana is going to be legal, the sky's going to fall. But we've seen in other states, in fact, which is, if anybody would have had a difficult part, you think the United States have, they've opened it up, and it seems like it's no big deal. I've driven through Washington, and every once in a while you say, oh, that's a dispensary. That's kind of weird because it's not crowded around. There's not smoke coming out of the top of it. It's a normal everyday building. So I think that I hope by people seeing that legalizing marijuana didn't really matter that much, it was a good thing, that maybe it could be a kind of an opportunity to go one step further.
And what about smoking indoors? I'm wondering do you know any of what's going to happen with that, where you can legally smoke it, you can be out on the street, we were talking earlier.
Yep.
Seattle, you can walk down the street.
Walk down the street.
People are smoking it. Can we do that here, you think?
Yeah, I think the issue is going to be secondhand smoke. I've got a bit of background in that area as well. I've fought, the hookah thing was kind of naturally like that. And I think the question is going to be, because I know that they're pushing more for example, you might have heard it in condos, you can't smoke in your own condominium at some point.
And what if you have kids, too?
Yeah.
You don't want to be smoking at home with your
So,
family there.
My personal thoughts is the government's overreaching. However, I appreciate that secondhand smoke has some things in it that, are probably not good for you. I think I think we have edibles on the way coming, and that gives, if I have that now here, you're not affected by that. Whereas if I smoke, you are.
Yeah.
So I think that my sense of what I've seen from the courts is, you have an alternative, i.e. oils or edibles or whatever, therefore you really don't need to smoke. So I don't see that the smoking is going to be, I don't think it's going to be increased anywhere you can smoke. You can't smoke cigarettes, you probably can't smoke cannabis.
Let me ask you this. What about the folks that are in jail for marijuana right now? What happens to them? All of a sudden it's legal, you got someone who's got a record, you've got someone who's in jail. Is there any talk at all? Have you heard any talk about that?
Well, I have. And I also think, though, that I can appreciate maybe the federal government doesn't want to say, hey, we're not going to do anything, because they want that potential threat for people right now. And if they say, when we put this on, don't worry about it.
Oh, so go and knock yourself out right now.
Yeah, go do whatever you want.
Right.
I don't think they could do that, but I would hope that they would. Common sense, because it is very serious to have a criminal record. And for something, 1 month it's a problem and another month it's not, I think is wrong. But I don't make those decisions. So.
Well, no, it's already confusing enough that there'll be different rules in different provinces.
Yeah.
But again, I get it. We've already done that with alcohol. I remember moving to Saskatchewan when I first moved there, and the bar was closing, and the guys walked around back to buy off sale to leave. And I go, what do you mean? So the bar's closing at 1, you've had too much, you can now walk out back, buy a flat of beer at 1 a.m. Like, it just seemed like not a good idea at all, but across the province, that off sale, that's all good. And I thought, that's a strange rule. So it already is different with alcohol, so it wouldn't be a surprise if it was different in every province. And I guess it depends which government's in charge in each province at the time.
Yes, that's true. I could see this being an election issue.
Yeah, for sure.
I think could be.
Did we get any?
Do we want to?
Oh, yeah, let's see.
Sure, we can ask some questions here.
We appreciate you, because you never know what you're going to get here, Dean, so who knows?
Oh, here we go. Oh, I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
So Tiffany in Calgary asks, are dispensaries legal now or not? Because they're confused. They can walk in right now and...
Yeah. Technically, under the federal law, they're not.
Are the medical ones illegal too now, even still?
Dispensaries are not technically legal.
Okay, interesting.
So there is an opportunity. There's a lot of background, but effectively the courts have struck down multiple federal regimes, and right now there's no mechanism for a dispensary.
Interesting, okay.
Another question, why are thousands of people continuing to be arrested since Trudeau announced the legalization?
Well, that's what we were just talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would imagine it's not that many. I think that was what's weird about Toronto, is that they were very aggressive, and I just don't, and then a few months later we hear, oh, guess what, we're going to take over. It just doesn't seem right to me.
Right, a little hypocritical perhaps.
It does seem like a little bit like that, right? Because those people are all charged criminally. That's very serious. But we'll see what happens.
We have another question here. How will the incoming regulations protect children from access?
Well, it's not the regulations, it's the Act, the Cannabis Act, and I would encourage everybody to go have a look at it. It's not that easy reading, but it's something to look at, inform people, make better decisions, and can influence their government, hopefully. It does speak to anybody under 18 is certain criteria, and anybody under 12 a different criteria, so it does kind of outline those things. And it does have a lot about marketing and advertising, and not to be advertising to minors.
Yeah.
Very similar to what liquor is now currently, right? They can't sponsor certain things. So I think the government said they wanted a couple things. One was to keep it away from kids, and I think that's what they've done in that relationship, or in the Act, is not unreasonable.
No, I know, but as we were talking before the show, I was, when I was a kid going to school, you can get it anywhere you possibly wanted. And I don't have a feeling it's gotten any harder. If not, it's gotten easier over the years. That's why I find the whole thing about kids a little overblown. Of course no one wants kids to be smoking it. We get that completely. But to pretend that it's not happening right now and that this is going to change it, I find ridiculous.
It is. I think that hopefully they take some of the funds that they get and use that in education.
Yeah.
Let people make decisions. But you're right, there's probably kids doing it now.
So,
of course. And I think any school in the mainland,
I think the worst thing to do would be to pretend that's not the case.
Right. It's not a brand new product. It's been around.
And educate them on the safety of use.
Yeah.
I think, do we have one more, or are we done?
Well, I just have a question to
yes,
myself about driving. Do you think that the laws are going to stay the same penalties as drinking and driving laws? Or is it going to just do a whole 360?
Well, my sense of all laws, they should have a reason, and harm reduction should be one of them. And I think that because someone may have some residual of some THC or something in their system, there still should be a connection to, are they able to drive, right? I think there's a connection to, what alcohol you have in your system to make you safe or not safe. The problem I understand from my looking into this is that maybe long-term users have it in their system longer. So it could be a week or so since you've done something which affects your driving and not at all.
Right.
But you could be in a problem. So I don't know what's going to happen. It's very interesting. Hopefully they do it right. They don't just do it to placate somebody, right? A group that says we need to ban this.
Zero tolerance.
Yeah, zero tolerance or something crazy like that, because that's going to cause nothing but problems. Hopefully they find a way to measure if you're less able to drive and then deal with it that way.
Dean, thanks so much for coming in
No
today,
problem.
man.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it completely. Dean Davison, the Davison Law Group. We appreciate a number of clients who are dispensary owners. And as you said, it's a legal limbo, a gray area, to say the least.